Hello, everyone. I hope you have all had a good couple of weeks. I had a personal thing which I thought would take 1 week, but it lasted for 2 weeks, and yeah, I have been busy. So I'm getting back to this after 2 weeks, and I hope you have had a good time all that while. I have got few reminders, few comments, and about about this video series asking me about what happened, and yeah, it was kind of an impromptu thing. I never had a chance to pre-plan, pre-schedule that, but it was good. It was boxed in a couple of weeks, and now I'm back to my old schedule. uh, so let's get started for the highlights today. The first one from Effortless. Life doesn't have to be as hard and complicated as we make it. Each of us has, as Robert Frost wrote, promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. No matter what challenges, obstacles, or hardships we encounter along the way, we can always look for the easier, simpler path. This was this is essentially the premise of the book Effortless. The idea is not the idea of the book Effortless is not that you do the simple things or you do the easy things. It's not about simple, it's about easy things. It's not that, it's the book is not saying that you should do easy things. The book is about making things so easy for you, making things so simple so that it's very straightforward for you to do something. And kind of the diagram, it's very difficult to see on the screen, but you can see the cover that rather than overthinking about something and like making a mess in your head, rather than that, approach straight to the problem. And the book deals with a lot of it, right? But this particular highlight, it's about it's talking about, okay, no matter what challenges, obstacles, or hardships we encounter along the way, we can always look for the easier and simpler path. That is, we still meet our objectives. The objectives don't have to become easy. We are looking for a path that makes it easy for us. And yeah, sometimes we need a book to remind us about this, because we tend to overcomplicate things very often, right? And this book is a reminder that it doesn't have to be that. There are easy ways, there are simpler ways out, and it doesn't make it any the worse. It's not like you're giving up on quality. That's not what it's talking about. It's not talking about skimping on quality or skimping on giving up on something which is very critical. It's not talking about that. It's talking about truly, the objective that you need. Figure out that objective and determine and figure out the straight path to that objective. That's what the book is about. Let's go on. The molecule of more. Gamers progress through levels while increasing their strength and abilities. It's a dopamine dream come true. To keep progress front and center in a gamer's mind, the screen constantly displays the accumulating points of growing progress bars, so players never forget. They have to keep pursuing more. And this book is all about dopamine, like I've said before. And it's showing, why games are the ideal place. Like it says, it's a dopamine's dream come true, because there is always the next level in the game. That, okay, yeah, I'm playing God of War Ragnarok and I'm at level 7. It's a pretty high level for game, but for the mid game where I am right now. But of course, there is level 8, there is level 9. There's always some stat that needs to be upgraded, and that's what dopamine wants. What's the next thing? It's not happy with what we have. It's, okay, what's the next stat I can increase? What's the next weapon I can upgrade so that I reach that next level? And games are designed for that. Games, like it says, the progress, to keep the progress front and center in the gamer's mind, it's right on the screen that you're at this level, you're at this hit points, you're at this skill level, and so on. They have to keep pursuing more. It's a, yeah, that's what the book is pointing out, this particular highlight. Moving on. 7.5 lessons about the brain. Think of the last time you were thirsty and drank a glass of water. Within seconds after draining the last drops, you probably felt less thirsty. This event might seem ordinary, but water actually takes about 20 minutes to reach your bloodstream. Water can't water can't possibly quench your thirst in a few seconds. So what relieved your thirst? Prediction. As your brain plans and executes the actions that allow you to drink and swallow, it simultaneously anticipates the sensory consequences of gulping water, causing you to feel less thirsty long before the water has any direct effect on your blood. So this highlight is from a particular chapter in which the author is talking about brain's ability to predict. And this example, it's quite self-explanatory. It's a rather long highlight, and I think you've got the point that the brain is telling every organ that okay, the thirst is quenched before it actually happens, before the water can possibly reach your bloodstream. Like it says, it takes around 20 minutes to do that. But way before that, you already feel less thirsty. You already feel satiated. And this, along with many other examples in this particular chapter, it talks about the brain's ability to predict. So I don't think there is much more I can talk about over here. um, we have talked about few other things about brain's ability to predict, and I'm by no means an expert on this topic, so I'll just move on. It's a supplemental highlight, so I'm not sure how much I can say, but this book is Staff Engineer. It's a book I read some time back, and it's filled with interviews. So the first half of the book is kind of takeaways from all the interviews, and then the second half of the book is the interviews, the raw interviews themselves. So let's see. A surprising number of projects are one small change away from succeeding, one quick modification away from unlocking a new opportunity, or one conversion away from consensus. I think of making those small changes, quick modifications, and short conversations as editing your team's approach. Okay, yeah, I don't remember the context of this particular highlight. It's talking about making those small changes, the small critical changes as editing your team's approach to do what. And I'm thinking I'm missing that in the context over here. It of course, like the subject, like what the highlight specifically focuses on about, that's quite on the point. Sometimes it's just like one small thing that you need to figure out, to to completely change something. But I'm not really sure what it means by editing your team's approach. So I think let's move on. Everyday chaos. This is very unlike the MR approach that for decades assumed customers could be manipulated by putting words and images in front of them that would trigger their unconscious Freudian fears and desires. It is not even as direct as nudges that use evolutionary accidents of our brains to move us in the desired direction. Again, I'm losing the context of this. I have no idea. Yeah, I get these two examples that um, like it's talking about manipulation during advertising, presumably when you're putting words and images in front of your customers to trigger certain responses, psychological responses, based on their Freudian fears and desires, or small nudges, like sometimes it's like a drastic measure, sometimes it's a nudge. But what is it unlike? I'm not really sure. I don't remember that from the context. So I'll move on. Getting things done. Many people try to get organized but make the mistake of doing it with incomplete batches of stuff. You can't organize what's incoming. You can only capture it and process it. Instead, you organize the actions you need to take based on the decisions you've made about what needs to be done. This is the kind of like a recurring theme in this book. It's not, you can't plan the tasks as they come in. You can only plan the actions that you're going to do. I have spoken significantly. I think that every highlight about getting things done so far has been about the actions being important, not the tasks themselves. So if a task comes in, you can only just capture it and process it. You can't really plan for it. You can't really organize it, like the highlight says. You can organize, you can plan for the first action, the first thing that you need to do with on the task. Yeah, you can plan for that. But there's nothing, it doesn't make sense to plan for the task itself, because, and we have discussed this at length before, why it doesn't make sense to plan for a task, but rather the first action on the task. That is what you should plan for. So let's move on. Remote Not Distanced. That's a new book I have started reading recently. Organizations often ask people to take risks and experiment more. However, most employees are afraid of making mistakes because they fear retaliation. I think this highlight pretty much says it all. This book is about, like being a remote company doesn't mean that remote or hybrid, hybrid is also covered in this book. It doesn't mean that the employees are distant from each other. And it's about building the culture, building the processes, the practices that would help the team come together in a better way, come together frequently, or achieving better outcomes. So this highlight, like I said, it's pretty straightforward that organizations sometimes they just pay lip service that okay, yeah, take risks and experiment more. But when people actually take risks and experiment, there's every possibility that the experiment fails, right? That's why it's an experiment. It'll Yeah, it can succeed, but it's every bit as likely to fail. So if it fails, that's when the test for the organization comes in. That's when you get to determine the culture of the organization, that okay, is it rewarding only successes, or is it encouraging practices, sorry, or is it encouraging experiments? If it is going to encourage experiments, it's equally likely to celebrate the failure, because it's a lesson learned, it's knowledge gained. Failures are not just failures. It's an increase in knowledge. You've learned something. You learned something that doesn't work now. But if the organization is punishing it, if the organization on one hand is saying it's encouraging people to take risks and experimenting, but then it's punishing people for failures in that experiment, then it's just lip service. The organization is not really serious about innovation in that case. So yeah, the book is talking about building the culture where people are. This, I think, it's in the section of psychological safety. It's when people speak up and innovate, when they're talking about innovation, new ideas that may seem completely unintuitive. It may seem that okay, this cannot work at all, and yeah, I think I lost my train of thought over here. But essentially, it's about organizations saying one thing, but then when people actually take a risk, take an experiment, perform an experiment and fail, and then they're punished for it, people will stop taking risks. They'll just play it safe, and that the organization will suffer as a result. So yeah, that's about it. Let's move on. Range. Incredibly, the hedgehogs performed especially poorly on long-term predictions within their domains of expertise. They actually got worse as they accumulated credentials and experience in their field. The more information they had to work with, the more they could fit any story to their worldview. So hedgehogs, they're not, the author is not talking about actual hedgehogs. They're talking about people who are deeply entrenched in one skill. Hedgehogs as compared to what was the other metaphor? I forget. So the highlight says that as they gained more and more knowledge about this specialized subject, they were able to fit any story into their worldview. So it's explaining basically how people who think they're experts, they can they're they're much more likely to make mistakes. Um, it's and this highlight kind of explains why that happens. Because if you feel that you have more knowledge about something, you can fit any worldview into that story. You'll always have an explanation, because you'll feel obliged to come up with an explanation. You'll always have one. And anything that you see, rather than thinking of alternative explanations, you will try to fit it into your worldview. So yeah, that's this is, I think, quite well covered in this book also. Think Again by Adam Grant. This whole concept of why is it so difficult for people who think they know a lot? Why is it difficult for them, like the apparent experts? um, why is it so difficult for them to think of something new or make accurate predictions? So yeah, let's move on. The talent war. If you want to be victorious, you need good leaders, and that requires transforming your high potentials into high performers. um, yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. The talent war is really about a book on hiring. How do you hire, and the different hiring cycles in companies and what you should really optimize for. So this highlight, like as you can see, it's prioritizing leadership qualities. So it's pretty straightforward. Let's move on. Team topologies. Even though many people see DevOps as fundamentally addressing technological aspects of automation and tooling, only organizations that also address fundamental misalignments between teams are able to achieve the full potential benefits from adopting DevOps. This is really along those lines of when we say that DevOps is really a culture. It's not a set of tools. It's not technology. It's a culture. And yeah, this you can adopt all these modern tools like infrastructure as code, and you can be in cloud and everything. But if your team is not working, it's not breaking down the barriers and like the whole culture again. Like I think that's a little long to explain over here right now. But if your team is not adopting the mindset of DevOps culture, it's just DevOps will become another team along with the rest of your teams, and it will be I've seen that it typically ends up in frustrated teams, all of them. Like DevOps being just another ops team with a fancier name, DevOps, like a DevOps engineer and all of that, which is, of course, it's not a thing. It's DevOps is a culture first and foremost. And yeah, only like the highlights is only organizations that address the fundamental misalignments between teams are able to achieve the full potential benefits from adopting DevOps. It's not about the tools; it's about adopting the culture. And I think that brings us to the end of the highlights today. This is just how to use Readwise, and think we are done. And that's the end of another highlight. I'm getting back to this after a week, after 2 weeks, like I said. So yeah, I hope this is fun, and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.